Welcome to On the Middle East, Al Monitor's podcast on the big and interesting stories in the region. Today, I'll be discussing the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. The attack was likely carried out by Israel and marks a further escalation in what was long labelled a shadow war between the Islamic Republic and the Jewish state. That war burst into the open when Israel attacked the Iranian embassy in Damascus in April, and Iran struck Israel for the first time with a barrage of missiles, albeit designed to cause minimal damage and loss of life. With us here to discuss the implications of the killing of Haniyeh, who was in Tehran to attend the inauguration of Iran's new president Masoud Pezeshkian, is Hamidreza Azizi, a visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Welcome to our program, Hamidreza.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
It's always a pleasure for us as well, except that we always seem to be talking about these very dramatic events, and it almost feels like a Groundhog Day where, the same story keeps repeating itself. So today we have yet another assassination of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. I think this marks a big escalation, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, of course. The incident was significant from different angles. The level of the person who was killed, the top political leader of Hamas, was quite significant. The timing was significant for different reasons. On one hand, it happens at the middle of the ceasefire talks between Hamas and Israel, and at a time when there were indications from different sides that there might have been some progress towards reaching an agreement. On the other hand, when it comes to Iran and the timing related to the Iranian side, the venue in which the incident happened, it was only a few hours after the new president's inauguration, in which he basically talked about his willingness to improve relationship with the world, normalize trade relations, economic relations, etc. So it's quite significant. And on top of all that, the fact that this happens in Tehran and at the heart of this network of the so-called axis of resistance, and at a time when Iran has been boasting about how successful the whole network has been in basically keeping Israel entangled. And on the Iranian side, just a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, the Iranian intelligence minister was saying that we have been successfully neutralizing Israeli attempts at sabotage, etc. So all these aspects make it quite a significant development, I think.
Absolutely. Of course, we still have no formal confirmation that Iran was responsible, but I think we can all agree that that Israel is responsible, but I think we can all agree that Israel most likely is responsible, and this comes on the heels of a separate attack in Lebanon against a Hezbollah leader. You said that Iran was sort of flouting its strength and its ability to, hit back at its enemies. But Iran is the one that keeps apparently getting hit. What do you think Iran's response is going to be this time? Because the last time we had that barrage of missiles directed at Israel after, Israel hit the Iranian compound in Damascus, but the whole thing almost seemed choreographed, where it was intended actually to not cause any significant damage or any casualties. Do you think we're going to see a replay of that, given that Iran absolutely doesn't want to be dragged into a conflict, does it, with Israel or the West?
Let's start with the first point you mentioned, that Israel has not taken responsibility. I think that's a very important factor in assessing Iran's potential response, because one of the very important aspect of the attack on Iranian consulate in Damascus on April 1st was that Israel directly and openly claimed responsibility for that. And that was one of the maybe the key factor that caused Iranian leaders to conclude that they have no other option but to retaliate and retaliate directly and massively against Israel. So that's quite significant. So in that sense, I think if as long as there's no official confirmation from the Israeli side, there's at least some room for maneuver on the Iranian side. This doesn't mean that we are not going to witness a response. Mostly because the narrative basically coming from Tehran over the past few hours has been quite similar to the one after the Damascus attack. And with Khamenei openly calling for a revenge and saying that basically Haniyeh was a guest and he was targeted in our house. So it's quite indicative. But, the thing is that in order to speculate or assess Iranian response, we need to look at the broader picture, the developments of the past 2-3 days, especially since last night when the top Hezbollah commander was killed in Zahiya, in Beirut. So Hezbollah itself has enough incentive to retaliate. After that, we had some incidents in Iraq, in Babil province, against some of the bases of Popular Mobilization Forces. And now this thing in Tehran. So we have seen incidents almost all over this so-called axis of resistance. So based on that, my anticipation is that, an expectation is that there's going to be a coordinated response by Iran and its allies. It might happen somewhere else in the region, not necessarily this time from Tehran, because of the reason that I mentioned, because Israel has not taken direct responsibility. It may happen from Syria, it may happen from Iraq, for example, but there will definitely be a response, and they will do it in a way to make sure that the message has been sent and the kind of deterrence, at least to some extent, has been reestablished, which is very tricky, as we have seen.
Well,
So
when you say reestablishment, of deterrence, there clearly was no deterrence because Israel has just kept at it. And this makes Iran look extremely weak. Right?
That's true. But the thing is that, the threshold, on one hand, the threshold for confrontation, direct confrontation between the sides has been moving since October 7th. On the other side, the concept of deterrence has been damaged on both sides. We shouldn't forget that, just a couple of weeks ago, there was the Houthi drone attack at the heart of Tel Aviv. So looking at it from the perspective of Iran in their own way, they think that, if they have been hit, they have been able to hit back as well. But the thing is that the significance, especially this latest case, was quite, notable. And given that it seems that we are witnessing a chain of events, as I said, in Beirut, in Iraq, in Tehran, and now I saw reports about an incident, an explosion in Sayyid Zainab area in Damascus. So it seems that as if Israel has decided to, escalate on all different fronts.
Shrine, right? So our audience knows.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Tehran's security zone. So this is the message, actually. If that also has something to do with Israel, the message would be that, we can reach those areas that are deemed most secure for you and your allies. So Dahiya in Beirut is the main Hezbollah headquarters. And we heard that the place where Haniyeh was stationed in Tehran was a state compound. Some say that it belonged to the presidential office. Some others say that it was a Force compound. I would say it's the latter because, the security of these, people are mostly with the IRGC and the Force. But in any case, and the Sayyid Zainab, which is the main base for Iran and Hezbollah in Damascus. So the message is clear that we can reach you, and we can reach you at your safe havens, actually. That's
but the
dilemma.
Iranians also kind of sent that message. Even though it was choreographed, as we said, Iran still, attacked Israel for the first time directly. And as
Yeah.
you mentioned, the Houthis managed to strike Tel Aviv. I mean, where is this all going? Because each time this happens, all the analysts come out and say neither side wants this to, escalate into a full-blown war. And, but it just keeps happening over and over again. At what point does this escalate into a full-blown war? I guess it can only do so if the Americans come in and back Israel, I guess, against Iran. Is that correct?
Look, the thing is that that's why actually I mentioned my idea about basically red lines and the thresholds being shifted all the time since October 7. And where this is leading us, it is leading to a region-wide escalation and kind of an actual regional conflict, because since day one, since October 7, people have been warning about the potential for a regional war breaking out. But the thing is that, if we look around across the region, we are at a regional war at the moment. It might be a collection of lower scale wars, but they are all connected to each other. And the connection is on one side, Iran and its allies, on the other side is Israel. And of course, looking at it from the Israeli perspective, the October 7 did not happen, as an isolated event. And regardless of the extent to which Iran was involved directly or not, Iran was the actor that enabled these actors. So is the interpretation, I think, on the US side, with the difference that they don't want to get engaged in this, and they want to basically de-escalate as much as they can during this whole period of heightened conflict all over the region. So the context is, as I said, is quite significant. And one thing that can help reduce the tensions, of course, at least to some extent and for some time, would be, of course, something that many people have been talking about, and that's the ceasefire in Gaza. And this is actually something that seems to be, less within reach than any time in the past few weeks or months, because, you are losing, at the Palestinian side, you are losing your chief political figure at the middle of this whole negotiations, and then at the same time you consider yourself as part of this network, which is now considering a coordinated response. So the prospects are quite bleak, I would say, for that.
But getting back to my question, I mean, unless the United States is firmly behind Israel, it's very unlikely that Israel could really go to war against Iran directly, correct?
That seems to be the case, right? And it seems that in many cases over the past few months, for example, after the Iranian attack on Israel, when the Israeli side was, considering its own response, it was mostly the U.S. pressure that, convinced basically the Israelis to basically lower the scale of the response. And in this case, I think the pattern of incidents happening, I'm not sure to what extent, but it must have some approval from the American side as well, because one of the arguments we've been hearing among many was that what the United States prefer is for Israel to end the war in Gaza because of the humanitarian catastrophe going on, etc., and focus on a new stage of the conflict, which would be the targeted, killing of Hamas commanders, etc. But what was unknown and seems to be the most challenging aspect is that where this thing is going to happen, and was it going to be in Doha, where the political office of Hamas is based? That didn't happen. Is it going to be in Turkey? That didn't happen. Now it happens in Tehran, which in itself has enough incentive to, escalate further.
Well, but also,
so there's always complications in that.
Haniyeh was prime minister at one point. I mean, he's a civilian, quote unquote. He's not an armed commander. So, that also complicates things. And as you said, he was part of the negotiating process. But I mean, timing wise, of course, it's very interesting because you have this presidential election in the United States. You have a new Democratic candidate who's been slightly less indulgent of Israeli abuses in Gaza. And so maybe this also makes life harder for Kamala Harris, as she has to show that she can be tough as well on quote unquote terrorism. This does place her in a very delicate position, obviously. What do you think of the timing of this attack? Is it because it was an opportune moment and they did it because they could and they had the intelligence and they planned to do it all along? Or is there a broader agenda here on the part of Netanyahu?
Look, on the intention, I think it was quite clear that, and the Israelis had already made it clear that they would do their best to target Hamas officials, regardless of whether they belong to the political or military, section of the organization. That they would target them anywhere they can find them, and that was why we had some speculations of possible Israeli operations in Doha, as I mentioned, or in Turkey. In both cases, there were different factors. Doha playing the role of the mediator, and also, of course, the strong U.S. objection, I think, made Israelis think twice. In the case of Turkey, of course, I would, think that the last thing that Israel might want at this moment would be to have Turkey, like fully supporting Hamas and
Well, it
getting involved
is.
in this.
Anyway, it
So,
is. And in fact, the Turkish
I mean, of course, politically,
president
of course,
went
but
as far as to suggest that he might intervene militarily in Gaza. I
narrative
mean,
is one thing, but if something happens in assassination at this scale would happen in Ankara or Istanbul, then it would be difficult to imagine that Turkey would stick to
well,
the
it would
political narrative.
probably
No, you
break
know much
off
better than me, of course.
diplomatic
But
relations with Israel. That's for sure. That's kind of what
but
a
in any
lot
case,
of.
what I want to say is that the intention was clear, but the timing, of course, is quite, let's say, suspicious, because this wasn't the first time since October 7th that Haniyeh and other Palestinian and Lebanese leaders had traveled to Tehran. There was a meeting, for example, between not with Haniyeh's presence, but with other top delegates of these organizations in Tehran on the sidelines of Raisi's funeral. There was another one, Ziad al-Nakhala of Islamic Jihad, and Ismail Haniyeh a few months ago. They went to Tehran. So there was already quite a few opportunities. But I think, here, on one hand, I think it has to do with of course, presidential race in the United States, as you mentioned, because I mean, Kamala Harris, of course, has a different tone even compared to Biden, and doing this and anticipating, of course, a response from Iran and Hezbollah. One can imagine that the United States will be pressured from within, actually, to show a response, and then Netanyahu may actually, reach its aim of basically having stronger support from the United States in the war. And then we have the Iranian election, as I said, and the message of potential improvement of relations with the world. And of course, the developments in domestic politics of Israel, the pressure from the opposition on Netanyahu. So this might have convinced them that, doing a big thing, taking such a big step would be a victory in order to sort of cement Netanyahu's position domestically, especially within his right-wing allies. So these are the factors that contributed to the timing of the attack, I think.
Coming to where the attack actually came from, what do you think? I mean, it was probably some kind of drone, right? Something. like a drone. I mean, I'm not a military expert, but clearly it had to come from somewhere. So what would your guess be? Did it
Uh,
fly Iraq or Azerbaijan, as some are claiming? What happened?
I have heard two main interpretations so far, or let's say rumors, basically, as long as they are not confirmed. One is that the attack happened using a drone, firing a missile to the compound where Haniyeh was stationed. And the other one, which I saw a couple hours ago on Twitter, people were speculating that it was from an Israeli submarine in the Persian Gulf, actually. So in both cases, there are a lot of unknowns and kind of unclear points because in the latter case, for example, one could think of different layers of intelligence failure, which would be, I mean, of course, there has been this failure before, but not at this kind of multi-layered form. So on one hand, we need to assume that the Iranians didn't notice the presence of the Israeli submarine, and then they couldn't intercept the missile from the submarine all over from the Persian Gulf to Tehran, which is more than 1,000 kilometers, which makes it quite weird, especially given the air defenses in Tehran. And in the former case, it should have come from somewhere, the drone. I haven't seen any kind of argument pointing, for example, to Azerbaijan or Iraqi Kurdistan this time. And we shouldn't forget that in the past, a few months ago in Isfahan, not the latest one, but the one before, where a military compound was hit. The drones were believed to be originated from within the country. So we know that Israel does have intelligence access within the country, does have operatives, and that might be also another option. But we should wait and see for more details, like what kind of missile has been used. Those things can make it a bit clearer what has exactly happened, actually.
But I mean, will Iran ever, be transparent about that?
I doubt about that, but at least from unofficial channels, sometimes things come out that can at least help. Or we can also see from the Iranian response. They may not say exactly, the details of the incident itself, but we can point to, for example, a foreign country as being the launch pad for a drone, or
Oh, and,
which would make it quite. I mean, the whole scenario would be different in that
and
case.
we've seen the Iraqi Kurds scapegoated and Iran attacking Iraqi Kurdistan with ballistic missiles and killing civilians on the grounds that, that Mossad had bases there. It's kind of I guess, face-saving way for them to be
Yeah.
able to say, okay, we've responded, we've done something, but obviously,
That's not going to work. That's not going to work this
no.
time for two main reasons. First of all, this is quite obvious, and just hitting somewhere in the Iraq, it didn't work in April. It's not going to work this time. And more importantly, maybe there has been a clear inclination on the Iranian side, and of course on the Kurdish side as well, to initiate a rapprochement. We've seen, I don't know how many times in the past couple of months, Nishirvan Barzani has traveled to Tehran. He was on the front line in the inauguration ceremony. So the relationships looks quite cordial. And I highly doubt that this time they are going to do this and, create new challenges in that relationship with Azerbaijan also. Because, especially since Pezeshkian has come to power, the Azeri side seems to have more incentive to basically, have better relationship despite the challenges in the South Caucasus and despite Iranian position. For example, just the other day, Khamenei, it was actually yesterday, Khamenei said in his meeting with Pashinyan that Iran continues to object the establishment of the Zangezur corridor. But despite all that, it would be difficult to imagine that Iran would put the blame on Azerbaijan.
Well, we shall all see. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Hamidreza. And
thank you very much for having me.
Talking to you again. Thank you so much. And this brings us to the end of today's podcast. For more in-depth coverage on Israel and the Gaza conflict, go to our website, www.al-monitor.com. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.